Welcome to NFL Nexus. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most confusing teams from the 2025 season, the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, this team went from looking like a surefire playoff contender to a team in an absolute nosedive, and now they're staring down a massive offseason. We're going to break down their blueprint for a comeback, and trust me, it is a fascinating and, you could say, incredibly risky one.
Okay, so let's really set the stage here, because disastrous might not even be a strong enough word. Just try to put yourself in the shoes of a Colts fan for a second. Your team is sitting pretty at 7-3, you're thinking about playoff matchups, and then you watch them lose 7 straight games to finish the year 7-10. That kind of collapse, man, that shakes a franchise right to its core. It puts unbelievable pressure on the front office, and it left the Colts in this really tough spot with key players heading for the door and a fan base that is, understandably, demanding some answers. So let's get into the moves they made and, maybe more importantly, the ones they didn't. You know, on the surface, the front office definitely looked busy. We saw signings, we saw trades, players coming, players going, but activity doesn't always mean progress, right? So the big question we've got to ask is, did all these moves actually improve the roster, or were they just kind of rearranging the deck chairs? Well, we're going to conduct a full post-mortem on their free agency period. We're going to diagnose the health of this roster, position group by position group, and see where the real strengths are and, where the glaring weaknesses now lie. All right, first things first, our roster diagnosis. We're going to take a hard look at the damage from the guys who left town and weigh it against the repairs they tried to make by bringing in some new faces. And we are starting with what is arguably the single most important group on defense in today's NFL.
That's right. We're talking about the guys whose only job is to give opposing quarterbacks nightmares. Look, the ability to get pressure off the edge. It's just non-negotiable if you want to compete for a title. A great pass rush can hide so many other problems on a defense. So what happened to the Colts' pass rush this offseason? Well, the answer isn't great. Now this slide tells a really interesting story. It's a story of subtraction without equal addition. So on one side, in the out column, you've got Kwity Paye. He's a former first-round pick who finally had that breakout year with 9.5 sacks. Right next to him, Samson Ebukam, a super reliable vet who pitched in another 8 sacks. So you're looking at a combined 17.5 sacks from your 2 starters. Gone. Poof. Now look at the in column. You've got Arden Key and Michael Clemens. Now look, these are not bad players by any means, but the sources are really clear on this. They're depth guys. Neither one of them has ever had more than 7 sacks in a season. You're basically swapping out proven, ascending starters for guys who have always been rotational players. That is a huge gamble and, on paper, a definite downgrade.
And that quote right there really just hammers the point home. This isn't a maybe, it's not a debate, it's a certainty. The edge rushing group is weaker right now than it was last season. And here's the ripple effect. All of this puts an absolutely enormous amount of pressure on their one remaining proven guy, last year's first-rounder Laiata Latu. Latu had a decent rookie year, 5 sacks, he showed some flashes, but now the Colts are basically betting the house that he's not just going to be good, but that he's going to make a massive leap and become a truly elite double-digit sack artist who can carry the entire pass rush on his back. That is a monumental thing to ask of a second-year player.
So, if you thought the edge rusher situation was a little concerning, just wait. Let's take a look at how the dismantling continued, this time at the absolute heart of the defense. If the edge rushers are the attackers, the linebackers are the brain, the command center. They stop the run, they cover the middle of the field, they get everybody lined up. And the Colts, they made a move here that sent some serious shockwaves through the organization and the fan base.
What you're looking at right here is a massive, massive void. And it's not just about losing players, it's about who they lost. Zaire Franklin wasn't just a player, okay? He was the team captain, he wore the green dot, that means he had the radio in his helmet getting the plays from the coaches, he was the undisputed emotional leader of that defense. Trading him creates a leadership vacuum on top of the production vacuum, and then you also lose Segun Olubi, who is another really key contributor. So to fill that huge hole, they bring in Akeem Davis-Gaither. He's a solid player, had a good year over in Arizona, but you can't expect him to single-handedly replace the production, the leadership, and the experience of 2 guys. It's just simple math. It's a net loss, and a big one.
So the diagnosis here is, well, it's pretty grim. The sources are calling this a major step backwards. Just think about that for a second. In an off-season where every team's goal is to get better, the Colts have taken a significant step in the wrong direction at 2 of the most critical spots on defense. And that phrase, liability of defense once again, man, that should send a shiver down the spine of any Colts fan. It just brings back some bad memories. So the picture's becoming painfully clear. This defense has been weakened, and it has some serious, glaring vulnerabilities as we look towards the draft.
Okay, so after that, pretty tough diagnosis of the roster's health. And after seeing the huge gaps they created in free agency, the prescription for what they have to do in the NFL draft becomes incredibly obvious. The team's strategy isn't some big mystery anymore. Their hands have basically been forced. Their entire path forward is now being dictated by the holes they didn't fill, or in some cases, the holes they created for themselves.
And this slide just perfectly lays it out. The two gaping wounds on this team. It is as clear as day. Defensive end and linebacker. And we're not talking about positions where they could use a little more depth. Maybe find a rotational guy for down the stretch. No. These aren't luxury picks you make when your house is already built. The sources are crystal clear on this. These are absolute, 5-alarm fire, DEFCON 1-level needs. The failure to really address these spots in free agency now puts an almost unbearable amount of pressure on this draft to find not just guys who can contribute, but immediate day-one starters.
All right, so now for the prescription part. How in the world do the Colts fix this? Remember, they don't have a first-round pick, so they can't just sit there and take the best player available. They've got to be surgical. They're going to be on the clock on day 2 of the drafts, and they'll be looking for guys who can provide an instant jolt of impact. So let's look at the potential medicine that could cure their ailing pass rush. Who are the prospects that could step right in and help?
So the first name that pops up in the source material is Gabe Jacas, a defensive end from Illinois. And what's so compelling about Jacas isn't just that he had one great season, it's the pattern of his career. This is a player who showed consistent, tangible, year-over-year improvement his entire time in college, which is exactly the kind of upward trajectory you want to bet on in a draft prospect.
I mean, just look at the progression on this slide. In 2024, he was already a really productive player. 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, but he didn't get complacent. He came back for his final year in 2025 and just took his game to a whole other level, jumping up to 11 sacks, but it's even more than the raw stats. The sources note he also racked up 41 quarterback pressures and got an elite 88.0 pass rushing grade from Pro Football Focus. Now, for those of you who don't know, PFF grades every single player on every single snap, and any grade over 85 is considered really high quality. That number tells you he was consistently winning his one-on-one battles and making life miserable for the quarterback, even on plays where he didn't get the sack.
So the bottom line here, and what makes him such a perfect target for a team with no first-round pick, is that he's ready to go. This quote says it all. The Colts just don't have the luxury of drafting some long-term project who needs a year or two to sit on the bench. They need a guy who can step on the field week 1 and play. And Jacas profiles as exactly that kind of player, a potential day-one starter who has the tools and the college production to make an immediate difference.
Okay, now let's shift our focus from the guys on the edge to that gaping hole right in the middle of the defense at linebacker. After trading away their captain, the Colts don't just need a warm body to fill a spot, they need a new anchor. They need a true difference maker, someone with the talent and the football smarts to become the new leader of that unit for years to come. And the name that just leaps off the page in the sources is Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech. He is, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the most intriguing prospects in this whole draft. What makes him so compelling is his crazy backstory. He didn't even start his college career on defense. He actually played quarterback at Virginia before he made the switch. That experience gives him a totally different lens to see the game through. He understands offensive schemes, route concepts, and what quarterbacks are thinking in a way that most defensive players just can't.
These numbers are just staggering. They paint this picture of a player who is a magnet for the football, always making game-changing plays. He's not just a guy who racks up a bunch of tackles, he actively creates turnovers for his team. Look at that jump in 2025. 4 interceptions and an absolutely incredible 7 forced fumbles. 7. That is not a typo. That number tells you he has an elite level of playmaking instinct and this aggressive attacking style that forces offenses into making huge mistakes. He is the definition of a defensive weapon.
And this quote just perfectly sums up his potential. He's a complete talent. But what's really telling, and what should get Colts fans excited, is that the source material compares his potential impact to former Colts great Shaq Leonard. For anyone who follows the Colts, that name means everything. Leonard in his prime was a Defensive Player of the Year type of guy who completely changed the game with his range and his uncanny knack for creating turnovers. To even be mentioned in the same breath as him suggests that Rodriguez has that same kind of sky-high ceiling, the potential to be a true franchise-altering player on defense.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the serious health problems on the Colts defense, and we've looked at the prescription, the specific draft prospects who could be the cure. So what's the final prognosis? What does all this mean for the Colts' path forward and really the entire philosophy of their offseason?
The blueprint could not be any clearer. This is a salvage operation.
The Colts' entire 2026 season could very well hinge on what they managed to do on Day 2 and Day 3 of the NFL Draft. Free agency was, at least on the defensive side, a step backward. So this draft isn't about adding luxury items or planning for 3 years down the road. It is about immediate, targeted, absolutely essential repairs to a defensive unit that has been seriously weakened. They are drafting for need because, frankly, they have no other choice. And that really is the bottom line. Every draft is important, of course, but for the Colts this year, the stakes are just astronomically high. They have to find starters, maybe even Pro Bowl caliber players outside of the first round. That's a massive challenge for their scouting department and front office. So what's your take on their strategy? Do you think they played their cards right in free agency, or did they back themselves into a corner? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please do us a huge favor and subscribe to NFL Nexus and like this video for more content just like it. And one more thing, you can help support our channel by purchasing our coloring books. They're perfect for kids, grandkids, even for adults. You can get to them through the link in the description or just use the QR code on your screen. Your support really helps us keep making these deep dives. Thank you.
And so we'll leave you with this final lingering question. It's one thing to say you're going to fix your defense in the draft. It's a whole other thing to actually pull it off, especially when your first pick isn't until the second round. Finding just one plug-and-play starter on Day 2 is usually considered a successful draft for most teams. But the Colts, based on the holes we just talked about, arguably need to find at least 2. Can it really be done? The future of their defense is riding on it.